Increasing numbers of people are waking up to the need to live more harmoniously with the earth, with one another, and with all life on the planet. We cannot continue as we have been, and other ways of living are possible. I am your host, Epiphany Paris, and I am one of the many holding space for this transformation. In this time, we can reconnect and share our gifts with one another. This show features conversations with rainbow warriors, healers, activists, artists, writers, farmers, and many other people who are living the questions and living the change in their personal lives. This show will focus on practical solutions, radical strategies, paradigm-shifting ideas, inspiring people, and spiritual transformations. This is the space between. In this space between the destructive times we have been living and the holistic way of life that is possible, we are here. What will we do with the time we have? And welcome to the show, everybody. I am very excited to be here. And today we have on the line Steve Smith. Steve Smith is a game design developer, writer, ritual artist, mythologist, and sword fighter. How are you doing today, Steve?
I am wonderful, Epiphany. It's lovely to talk to you.
Yay, it's lovely to talk to you too. We chat sometimes online, but I don't get to hear your voice very often.
No, indeed. I think it's been a few years at this point, actually, since I've heard you in live conversation.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, so today we are going to be talking about creating alternate worlds, connecting to mythology as a tool for personal growth, ways to live the questions about how to share one's calling and dreams with the world, and whatever we think of talking about. There might be a few tangents.
Maybe one or two.
Maybe one or two. Yeah, so to start out with, could you tell me about your game design work?
I would love to. Let's see. I've always, in my life, from the time that I was very small, I would say from maybe 5 or 6, probably the first time that I ever played a video game for the first time, and I could not even tell you what it was. It was, some like Jaleco system kind of thing, and just took to it like a duck to water, and really found a great deal of enlightenment and fascination in that, at least as much enlightenment and fascination as a 5-year-old can find, and really just loved the idea of getting to take part in the creation of those things, and would spend good chunks of summer afternoons taping together big blocks of dot matrix paper. I don't know if any of the listeners remember what dot matrix paper was like, but these long strands of 8.5 by 11 that were all conveniently connected. This is before I had a whiteboard at home, obviously. And would just sketch up different game designs just for the fun of doing it, and really have carried that dream despite trying to kind of squash it out, I guess, for a good chunk of my life. It's not a very practical dream to have. It's about as practical as any other form of artistic expression. It's very, very difficult to break into the industry. It's very hard to make a living off of it. And being a computer programmer for most of my life, there's obviously a lot more ways that my parents and peers would think that this is a better way to spend your time. But for all that I've tried to kind of conform to the world of people who do not design games for a living. I'm not sure if conform is the right word to use there, but hopefully that makes sense. That passion has always kind of come back and back and back, and no matter where I've worked or what I've done or when I've tried to tell myself that I'm satisfied with it, always keeps coming back to that for some reason, and so
calls to you.
Very, very much. It just seems to work for me, and I guess it was maybe just a couple of years ago that I really decided to stop messing around and start really investing some time in it, and it wound up taking the form of like 40-ish hours a month. Like that's all that I could spare from my time to do it. But I really discovered a tremendous love of the idea of building a virtual world, this world made of imagination that computers and computer technology make accessible, that can be very personally interacted with. I always found, as I was growing up, being the avid video game lover that I was, that my favorite types of video games were the sort of story-based role-playing games, the interactive movie, if you will, and found that I was able to really take a lot of meaning and inspiration from those, the same way that I was able to take from movies or books or theater or any other sort of artistic expression. So I guess it really found a place where I could accept it as a valid form of higher art, I guess, and that really gave me permission to continue to pursue it. As I mentioned, it's a very difficult thing to do. Very difficult trade and craft to practice. It really requires a lot of time and discipline that we functioning adults sometimes find a degree of difficulty in identifying. So I haven't really manifested that dream yet in the way that I would like to. But the dream continues to live on. Lots of pet projects in the back of my mind, and sooner or later I'll move on from what I'm doing nowadays, which is just creating little miniature games for the Android and iPhone systems, and it's a very exciting thing.
Awesome, great. So I loved when you were talking about like world of imagination, the idea that you're creating these worlds that people can interact in. That seems to me like that connects a lot with your ritual arts work and with the idea that you work with a lot, that people can transform their life through myths.
Definitely. The approach to those two different artistic styles, I believe, has always been very different at the beginning. Like my beginning understanding of game design and what it was, and my beginning understanding of ritual arts and what those are, really started from very different places, and they've really come to integrate together into a third sort of form of expression. So I've talked about game design as the idea of presenting this other world for someone to interact with and play with kind of the backdrop of, much like a movie or a book, the story is really there for the viewer, reader, player to experience. The story is written and described, and there's some sort of moral tale for it that the creator wants to impart upon the player or such. And on the other side, on ritual arts, the way that we were trained in Diana's Grove Mystery School, what I really took out of that was ritual and magic and personal relationship and connection to the divine are eminently personal things. And so trying to create community experiences really has to acknowledge and be aware of the individuality that each person brings. It can't be a preachy thing and really be successful. Some religious practices really find a lot of success along those lines. paganism and other modern earth-based spiritual traditions uh, don't really have that, and that's one of the reasons that I was always so attracted to it in the first place.
Well, and it seems to me that Diana's Grove in particular drew the sort of people that weren't into the extremely structured guided meditation type experiences.
I think so, and even if there were people who sort of already had that kind of locked in their mind, and it's very easy for anyone, I believe, in the Western world to really have that. Most people in the West come from a Judeo-Christian background of some kind, where there are these things that we do, there are these ways that we worship, there are these formulas and scripts that we follow. There's this massive book that contains the truth that we all agree on, and paganism doesn't really have that. So natural for people to be connected to the more structured kind of thing. But Diana's Grove, I'm offering the specific trance techniques that they offer. The idea of speaking the language of the subconscious and allowing the experience to form naturally within the mind of each individual there. Mm-hmm. And that particular intent and principle really expands out to the entirety of what they practiced and taught there. Really brings it home to the sacred is within the personal, and it's the experiencing of that wonderful personal in community that creates that level of ecstasy, and really creates the feeling of safety. The I don't need to believe the same things that you believe, because I'm having my experience and I can see you having your experience, and we're both still okay in that separation, in that difference. Our individuality is still preserved, and it's still sacred. Really, really cool stuff.
Right. Well, and the ability to have the journey that you need to have is not just about safety. It's also about, like, your subconscious mind, or the divine part of you, really does know where you need to go and what that journey needs to look like for you. Yes.
Yeah, very, very personally empowering. Very, very much I own my connection with the divine. It's not in the hands of this spiritual authority figure over here or anything of the like. Nobody gets to tell me the truth about my connection to the gods.
Right. I mean, I think we should mention just briefly, because I think probably a chunk of the people listening are from Diana's Grove, and they're listening because they know who you are.
Oh, hi guys.
But then there's probably people who have not been to Diana's Grove, so they don't necessarily know the distinctions we're talking about with the differences between guided meditation and the more open-ended language.
Certainly.
Sometimes used in trance.
Right.
And the difference being is that with guided meditation, it goes something like this. You are walking down a path. It's a stone path. At the end of the path, you see blah, blah, blah. And every little detail is imparted to you. Mm-hmm. Often.
Yes.
And then with the Diana's Grove, or with the style of trance that we've used a lot at Diana's Grove, it's more, you may be on a path, or maybe you're not on a path. There's like questions, and can you describe that better than I just did?
I can give it a shot. The trance technique is used to allow the individual to construct whatever they need to, sensorially, to have the kind of emotional experience that is being called for. You may be traveling on a path, and traveling on a path is a lot more timeless way of saying you are walking down a busy sidewalk. But maybe you're not walking necessarily through a rocky mountain ridge covered with glorious sequoia trees that grow in blue leaves and have little sparkling lights in them. Some people that imagery is going to work dead on for, other people not so much. And the conscious choice made in constructing an Ericksonian trance is take the detail out. Let the person themselves create the detail. And I kind of want to tie this back to what I was going to talk about earlier with writing and game design in general.
Yeah.
I have loved to write ever since I was very young. I originally wanted to go to college specifically for writing, and wound up then choosing math, and then computer science after that. It's a very, very broad arc. But one of the things that I really learned in a really fantastic, evocative fiction story is the details are left out. You know, the specific important things are kept in, but a good writer doesn't nail down every last little tiny bit of detail. They let the reader's imagination create it, and that helps fill in the gaps in a way that is very naturally much more accessible to the reader, because so much more themselves is then within the story. Same kind of concept in Ericksonian trance. In a guided meditation, it's experiencing somebody else's creation, and it's sort of like walking around as a visitor. For Ericksonian trance, so much of the content is being created without the person even knowing. That's one of the most beautiful things about it. Without even knowing that the person literally creates their own experience out of what their subconscious calls for, what they need.
Is that also why the style of games that you're drawn to is the role-playing game style?
I think so. I think that's really more of an extension of the vast power that story has. You know, I've heard it said by many fiction writers, you know, that there's a piece of all of us in every single character in those books. You know, protagonist, antagonist, secondary character, primary character, doesn't really make a difference. You know, the point is for those characters to be personally accessible. So they tend to be created in ways that a person can have empathy with and can see, okay, this is where a part of myself lives. And sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable. But one of the best ways that you know a writer really has you is when you despise their antagonists, I believe. You know, when the antagonists are really, really hated, it's like, you're connecting to a part of yourself there that you don't like. That's why you don't like it so much.
And hence the evil laugh. Ha ha ha.
Oh, yes. And with doing story-based games, which is the type that I make it my ultimate goal to create, you know, the goal there is really to create that spectrum of interaction. You know, I believe on some level that any sort of mythological story really represents different aspects of the individual that war with one another over who's going to get to make the decision in this particular moment. You know, they can be seen as sort of morality tales and you know, divine patterns for social sciences or the like, or just studies in interpersonal interactions. But I'm very self-focused, not necessarily, you know, myself focused, but I'm very aware of the value of self as a human thing, and so I tend to kind of see a lot of things through that lens. So with story, you know, particularly in the interactive story, where the idea is I can now make these different parts of myself play in this particular fashion and see how that works out. That's a pretty cool kind of playground for me, I guess, and I'm very excited about the possibility of getting to do that on a broader scope. Very
cool. Can you tell us about your dream game that you have going in your head that you want to build someday?
I'm sure that this is one among many, but the one that I'm really wanting to create right now is based off of some things that I really find a great deal of fascination with. And it's really based on craftsmanship and the way that craftsmanship reflects kind of cultural principles and individual levels of excellence. So craftsmanship is kind of the basis of this particular story-based game, where all of the individual characters have some relationship or dependency on quality handmade work, whether that's as someone who's making it and passing on the tradition, or just really finds it to be important, or needs it in a very practical sense. Unfortunately, don't have a sort of accessible synopsis of the story and kind of how it unfolds. But right. In my head, it sort of takes place in two different time periods. You know, sort of a back and forth between one age that is a you know, slight future from present, pseudo post-apocalyptic where corporations have essentially succeeded in buying out the planet, and governments are really just kind of there as pure entertainment. Like no one even really considers them to be real things anymore. They're basically the same level of importance and authority as a sports team. And the corporations, by controlling consumption and supply and demand across the world, in the face of economic globalization, they are the ones who actually have all the power now. And because there's no more governments and there's really no more rules, there's an awful lot of boost in sort of privatized military action. So every corporation has its own, its own chunk of military defense around its production, distribution, etc. So it's really the weapons manufacturers and designers of the world who really hold all of the power. Fairly bleak and kind of conspiratorial, slight left-leaning that I am, sort of imagination that creates a world like that. But the players in this, the player characters are not intended to be the sorts who are really embedded in that power structure. They're just they're people living their day-to-day lives and attempting to live their values and exert influence. And the idea is to sort of play as different types of characters in that world, whether it is the soldier of fortune looking for maybe the best way to improve their skills. Perhaps their particular path of enlightenment is very martial in nature. Maybe it's one of trying to integrate what they believe is sacred and right in with their particular actions in the face of grimness of war and so on and so on. Pretty common theme there. Mm-hmm. Some characters are more spiritual in nature. Obviously, spirituality has not evaporated in a world like this, so there are still spiritual leaders of the world who try to gain personal influence with the real power brokers. If you believe this paradigm, then you will act in this way. There's always going to be the political side of things, even if it's not necessarily through the government. Maybe it's more through sort of intercorporate diplomats or the sort, and really using these more subtle. These more subtle things to shift the story. Obviously, I don't want the whole game to be based just on conversation, but the way that the story is meant to unfold is by making these little subtle changes and these little subtle choices, and really kind of putting the character in these kind of crisis moments where they have to make the choice and therefore discover essentially this is who I am in this moment, and this is what that action brings. Is this making sense?
It's making total sense. If you're okay, I'd like to back up just a hair.
Sure.
To the worldview of the story. It seems like it's not really all that far removed from where we're at now. That's my personal perception. What's your take on that?
It's intended to be close enough to be imaginable. I've come to really accept that I don't really know a whole lot about politics or about how the world works. I do definitely believe that money speaks a lot louder than any sort of political action or seat of authority these days. I'm probably going to get some backlash for admitting this, but I don't actually participate in the political process because I don't believe in it anymore. I believe that my participation in the political process takes place with where I choose to shop. Do I choose to shop at a place where I know unfair trade practices are the name of the game in order to get a lower price, or do I take the slight inconvenience of going somewhere else where maybe the prices are a little more expensive? Maybe the food is not quite as delicious, or maybe I have to wait a little bit longer for it. But is it more in line with my values? I think that's a lot better way to really kind of redistribute that.
Did you catch my reaction to what I feel about you not participating in the political process?
I believe I heard it as meh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why on this show we're not going to probably be talking about the political process a whole lot. I'm probably not going to be talking about the presidential campaign, except for possibly in brief passing.
That's good because I'm more or less completely uninformed.
Well, and I don't just mean this episode of the show. I mean the whole entire show.
For sure.
Any episode. It seems to me like the process is increasingly irrelevant. If it was ever relevant, it's becoming less and less so now. So I'm with you on that. I personally think, and this is a slight tangent off of where we were with your games, but we'll get back to it.
No problem.
I personally think it's not just about how we spend our money, even though that's a big part of it. To me, it's also about creating alternative structures. So yeah. Creating community where we cooperate and we don't necessarily need to invest in the greed model or like sustainable communities and eco villages and things like that.
Certainly.
Cooperative businesses, all sorts of things like that. It seems like there's a lot of people who are creating alternate ways of getting what is needed.
Certainly, yes. I've heard of a lot of different movements all across the country. I can't name any of them officially off the top of my head, but I hear these things about in inner city reconstruction projects. Really intentional communities forming. Actually there is one here in Kansas City called Emerald City, which is based on the welcoming of any form of artistic expression and the use of that as a central principle for building a community in the middle of the really downtrodden areas of Kansas City and North Kansas City, where houses have been standing abandoned for years and are in just massive amounts of disrepair, and people are buying up these properties and trying to rebuild them and turn them into sort of these really open neighborhoods where there's a very open sense of welcome and community, and the still obviously subject to local law. We're not talking about people walling themselves off and creating compounds or anything like that. But really, like you were saying, we're really striving to discover and integrate sustainability principles right in the middle of the city, not out in the middle of nowhere, where it's a little bit easier to kind of live off the grid, but really trying to recreate that right in the middle of the heartland, right in the middle of these huge population centers where it tends to be really easy to believe that such things don't exist anymore and can't exist anymore.
Doing game design, you talked about in the beginning of the interview, is something that just keeps on calling to you. What's your sense of it? Would you say that it's your personal gift to give the world? Like, is it something where it's sort of your obligation to do it?
That's a great question. I would say that it's definitely something that I feel obliged to develop. I guess to really talk about that, I want to talk about my personal belief in the really inherent value of inspiration as a human experience.
Okay.
It occurred to me a long time ago when I was reading the book edition of The Princess Bride, which if any of your listeners have not read it but have seen the movie, I highly recommend you read the book. It's laugh out loud fantastic and has a bunch of stuff that isn't actually in the movie. But there's somewhere between that and all of the Lord of the Rings movies, and then reading those books there, I really gained the and I would go so far as to call this one a mini enlightenment, that inspiration really does beget inspiration, and it really does pass on kind of down the generations, and the things that inspire a person to create a work of art or tell a story or write a piece of music or even just to change in a small way the way that they live their life, that has the ability to pass on to other people as well. And
sort of like a ripple effect.
Yeah, I think of it more like waves coming off of a bell, which I suppose the sound waves, so ripple. So sure, yes, perfect. And being the computer scientist that I am, and having almost reflexive access to inductive reasoning, that means that the things that inspire me connect me back all the way through the whole of human history. Like some of the things that really inspire me are stories of personal courage, personal heroism and sacrifice, and any choice made for love, whether that's love for another person or love for a community or for an idea or a dream. Anytime that really kind of personal investment level of risk, I'm going to give my life to this. Stories about that really click with me, and sometimes it takes the form of stories, and sometimes I can just sort of hear it in like a piece of music. Music is a really fast track to discovering that sort of thing for me. And what I guess I decided on a long time ago is, if I have something that touches me like that, it's really a gift, because it teaches me a little bit more about who I am, and really helps me find my path to personal happiness. If I'm inspired to change my life in a little bit of a way, and I do so, and really discover that I am now more fulfilled and more integrated, I really find myself being very grateful to the person who passed it on so that I could be inspired by it as well.
Right.
And I guess that's where the sense of obligation to pass it on comes from. And I've really been regaining a lot of awareness, not just with game development, but also with writing and ritual arts and everything else that I believe to be important. This summer, especially since attending Pagan Spirit Gathering, that the gifts that I've received like that, my ability to speak in the language of games and to be inspired from it. If I really take that offering of inspiration as a gift, what I really feel aware of is that's not really a gift for me. It's a gift that I steward. It's a gift that it's what I can do, if I choose to, is nurture it and grow it and use it to pass on to the next generation or the next layer of people who might be touched by that particular spark.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And if I do that, then what I enable is the possibility of it continuing on forever, because it might spark something in them. They create something of themselves that sparks somewhere along the next lines, and on it goes, in this really immortal and infinite way, as long as human beings plan to be around anyway.
Yes.
Or I can choose not to. I can choose to do something else with my time, and I don't really feel like for myself that's a choice. What it does not mean is that I have to succeed in a specific form. If, say, for instance, the game that I've been talking about never comes to fruition in any way, or if it comes to some perhaps lesser format, maybe it winds up becoming like a little flash game that 6 people play online and then forget about. That's not really important. What's important is taking the action, following the intent, following the desire, and letting it wind up wherever it's going to wind up on the other end, and just believing that because I put a piece of myself into it, because I really put my intent into it, because I risked myself, that it's going to find where it needs to go. Yeah.
So in that I hear process versus product, which is a big thing that I was focused on, like when I was in college, is that it was about letting the process happen, because if you focus too much on the product, sometimes you can stunt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very much. one of my kind of personal heroes along those lines is J.R.R. Tolkien, who of course created all of the Lord of the Rings novels and all of the appendices and the countless books afterward. Just fleshing out this incredible other world, which, as a lot of people know, did not start as him attempting to create a world like that for the sort of impact that it had. It really started as him just telling bedtime stories to his children, and the richness of that world came out of his study of linguistics. He was very passionate about language as a form of expression. Very, very, very passionate about it. A lot of people don't know that he was a fiercely devout Roman Catholic, and after Vatican II and the Mass was, and then after that point, spoken in English instead of Latin. When he was at church, he would shout back the responses in Latin instead of in English, as sort of his own personal protest to it. Very, very passionate about that particular kind of expression. And what I choose to believe is, the breadth of impact that he had with his writing was not because he was trying to have that breadth of impact, but just because he was so true to what he loved and just really wanted to create a manifestation of that. He didn't care about publication or sales or anything of the like. I'm not even honestly sure how he went from telling these stories to his kids to being sort of the father of modern fantasy. But his stories really came out of his love of linguistics, like I was just saying, and the traditional folklore and mythology of Great Britain, and his love of the kind of warrior hero tales of those traditions, the Beowulfs of the world and the like, and I also really firmly believe that things like that, talking about Beowulf, not necessarily specifically, but any of the kind of courageous hero tales, for instance, they're based on real things. They're based on things that people actually did. Maybe it was just a momentarily witnessed action. Maybe I just saw someone stand up for themselves or for someone else. Just a glimpse of a really pure action like that can have that in it, and artists and poets and musicians can create these incredible things from it, and really carry that spark on, and then it winds up building, and eventually it becomes something that Peter Jackson winds up making and winning I don't even know how many Academy Awards for instance. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was ever the intent of the people doing that as they were passing it on. All they were doing was passing on something that they felt was important.
Right.
And so that's why I believe that in the process of passing on inspiration, what matters most is not, did I hit the mark with as many people as I possibly could, because that's so impossible to really measure. It's impossible to measure, and it's impossible to control. What matters is, what's that authentic expression? What's the truth? Where do we access the really deep human part of it, the part that really matters?
Right,
the part
and it seems
that does get touched.
Right, and it seems like it's possible to actually have a deeper, authentic connection if you're not worried about how many people you're going to reach. I mean, that's the generalizing of the message when you do that.
That would definitely be my experience. I tend to find that the more I try to make my creative work popular and accessible, the more just watered down and unimportant it becomes. I believe very much that intent comes through, no matter what the specific form of expression is or how it manifests. And if my intent is to try to convince people to like me, then on some level, consciously or otherwise, they're going to know about it, and they will not be touched by whatever that spark was.
Right, and that's something that's something that you and I have also talked about in the context of ritual arts as well.
Yes. Definitely in ritual arts. Oh. Yeah. No, I've got at least half of a book in the back of my head on the importance of authenticity in ritual facilitation. It's such an easy thing to forget or let go of, because public speaking is such a challenge for most people, and certainly was for me for a very long time. And it's hard in the face of that kind of nervousness and invisibility to really be present to a really very intimate and vulnerable thing. My relationship with the divine, which really is born of being within nature. I experience it in a very beautiful and touching way. When I connect with that, I really feel like I'm remembering all of the most important moments of my life at once, and that's a really terrifying thing to allow it to be witnessed. And I definitely would not say that it's something that I really impeccably succeed at doing as a ritual facilitator. But I also still very much believe that the more of that I allow myself to have out there, the greater opportunity for access I provide to the participants.
And you're talking about aspecting there?
Not even
not necessarily.
Aspecting. Aspecting is kind of its whole other thing. There is a lot deeper jumping off that happens with aspecting. I'm talking about just basic, leading things like grounding and centering and circle invocation, elemental invocations, things where I know I'm only going to be out there for a few moments, and I to this day I still get nervous going after those things. I've been a co-facilitator in dozens of rituals. I don't know if I'm quite up to 100 yet. I've got to be pretty close. The rituals with 30 or more people in them, and I still get nervous about it.
Right. The reason I assumed that was because you talked about reliving all different kinds of experiences at once. So to me, that sounded like more than calling in the elements.
Sure. What I'm more talking about there is just being in a state of being present to my divinity.
Mm.
Really being in that moment where, but my default state is seeing the sacred and the divine in everything around me, and regarding it as such. That to me is really the most beautiful thing about having a magical practice with community in the first place. It's being able to step out of the kind of day-to-day world where the principle of separateness is really the foundation for all of it. The I am separate from you. I must take care of myself in this way and allow you to take care of yourself in this way. It's very much about the divide. It's what creates things like competition and judgment of lives based on one another's accomplishments and trappings and so on. And being able to step into the magical space, all of that goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a terrifying thing for a lot of people. I mean, even just experiencing it from the edge of the ritual circle.
Yeah. Well, I think
really
that's the most powerful thing I've ever gotten out of ritual, is that sense of interconnectedness. And it's informed everything about how I look at the world.
Yeah, it can be really powerfully transformative in a long-term fashion.
Yeah, but you're right. It can be terrifying for sure.
Yeah. And it's that creation of really vulnerability and the community vulnerability and the more that the particular group, particular circle, the little ritual community within a community has the freedom to access that, the greater the intimacy is, and the greater the intimacy is, the greater the energy is, greater the energy is, the greater the ecstasy is, greater the ecstasy is, the greater the transformation. So the ritual facilitator's job as the artist is not to force on all of those things to happen, but to really make room for it. You know, like we were talking about at the beginning, where the magic takes place within the individual. That's something that I believe as a magical axiom.
Well, and that goes back to the gift that you're stewarding as well. You're creating space for it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I believe that as kind of a universal principle, maybe not necessarily what I'm calling a magical axiom, because that feels a little bit more biased towards specifically like pagan, earth-centered type traditions. I really do believe that every living thing on this planet has the desire to grow, whether that means physically growing or, you know, mentally, personally, whatever. To drag it back out of the abstract and back to the human. Human beings want to be better than they are, and better can be a pretty loose term, but you know, maybe that means I want to be more intelligent. Maybe it means I want to be more loving, more giving, more connected to the divine, but more of just whatever makes me me. It comes back to that you know, being focused on self as a value. I think that it's just a natural part of being alive, and that people will expand to fill at their own rate whatever space they have to fill.
Right. Absolutely. So I do want to talk about aspecting a little bit. You were talking about ritual quite a bit in general, which is great because I think it's good to talk about what the impacts of it can be. Last week in my interview with Sissel, who you also know,
of course,
we talked just a little bit about aspecting, and we were talking about it in the context of the question, is aspecting something where you're inviting a deity that's outside of yourself to speak through you, or is it an inner archetype that's speaking through you? And one thing that I forgot to say last week, and I feel like it's really important to always say anytime the subject of aspecting is brought up, which is that, in my opinion, it's something that should be done with caution and carefully, and you should know the energy that you're interacting with before you invite it anywhere, because your person is like your house, and you don't invite anybody in your house. But that said, that note of caution sounded. One of the most, whenever I think about aspecting, besides the times that I've done it in ritual, which is a few times, and you were there for one of those times, is when you aspected Chiron.
Yes.
I always think of that. When I think of Chiron, I think of you, and when I think of aspecting, I think of Chiron. Because it was such an impactful thing. You really did take that energy in. And for myself, and I'm guessing for a large number of the people there, and certainly for the people that I talked to about it later, you really became that energy, at least for a period of time. And that doesn't mean, of course, that anybody was like worshiping Steve. It wasn't that sort of thing. It was because you embodied it for us for a time, you really allowed us to interact with that energy and sense what it really is like. Which is how aspecting is done best, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think I'm really surprisingly quite comfortable with that perspective on it, because that was my first time ever practicing aspect in ritual. And
was it?
Oh yeah, yep. And I think possibly for that reason, it's the time where I really gave myself the most to it. I think all the times I've done it after that, there's maybe been just a little bit of nervousness around, you know, how much am I going to let through here? This is going to be a really quite powerful experience, and I was maybe a little bit less cautious during that first time. And you know, I think it's called aspecting for a number of reasons.
I'm not sure that I would necessarily assert that I really had, all of the energy that is Chiron. The broken healer, the warrior philosopher, the lonely paragon. I don't know if I could say that I really captured all of that. I would say that I had an aspect of it, so to speak. And and where that aspect comes from, like you were saying, there's kind of the philosophical debate. Is this really an external force that's being allowed to occupy some room inside myself, or am I just choosing to focus on the parts of myself that are very easily accessible to that kind of energy, and getting that through? And based on my experience with all of my aspecting, I'd say it's a little bit of both, because I've definitely thought and existed in ways, in aspects that I would not have imagined possible without being in that space. I'm trying to think of a particular here. Not to get too far off of Chiron, but when I aspected Mars, for instance, really feeling the total security of identity, and just the absence of even the possibility of judging anybody else for being different, or judging myself for being different from them. Really is not something that I feel I can accurately verbally summarize, because I've lived all of my life choosing to be aware of what other people think of me. Pretty broad human experience there, but the point is, it made room not just for that expression to be visible to the other ritual participants there. It also made a lot of room for me to connect more deeply with whatever that particular archetype was. So, with Chiron, what I was really accessing, was the sort of innate desire to seek perfection and to seek mastery, and to really integrate all of the different drives and passions of self, following this belief that all of them are sacred, and therefore all of them need to be upheld and treated as sacred, to really fully be lived. Chiron's personal path of enlightenment was really one of discovering how to manifest his divine being, and as part of that, as being the sort of mysteriously, very very philosophical, very very mentally minded, really long visioned and also physically immortal centaur, among the rest of the centaurs, who are bored and violent and drunk most of the time. That really spoke to the loneliness that I've experienced in my life when I am passionate about something that no one else seems to be passionate about, and having to make the choice of, am I going to really still continue to live within this passion, knowing that I'm going to be doing it alone and I'm not going to have anyone to share that joy with, or am I going to choose to try to suppress it for as long as possible until it becomes, bursting out of the edges of my psyche? And that continues to be part of my ongoing struggle.
Did you, when you aspected him in that ritual that I was present for, was that before or after the interview that you did, the writing that you did about talking with him?
I think that must have been before, because the interview that I wrote with Chiron was during my rites of passage year at Dionysusgrove, which was in 2008, and that particular ritual, I want to say,
that was before that.
Yeah,
that was. I want to say that was 2007.
Before he would move to Kansas City. Yeah. I think that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason, if anybody wants to check that out, Steve wrote It's sort of a dialogue. It's sort of a personal journey. It's called Interview with Chiron, and if anybody wants to check it out, I do have a link to it on the show's website, which is connectingbetween.com. And if you're listening to us live, it should actually be on the same posting that you're listening at. But it's connectingbetween.com, and you have here Interview with Chiron, Interview with Mars, Interview with Hades. And I'm really interested in how you use myth as personal growth for yourself. With Chiron, you talked some already about how interacting with that energy really shifted you and changed you. And you definitely talk about it more in the interview. Is that something that you've done? Is that usually how you do your personal growth work, is through the stories of the deities or other mythology?
I wouldn't say that. These particular interviews were done as part of creating content for the Mystery School packets themselves, and so I had done other sort of interview with larger things as part of different aspects of my personal work. I take spiritual counseling from Thorn Coyle right now, and one of her favorite things for me to do is do that process with what I consider to be my inner demons, and to really have a conversation with those parts of myself that I don't care for so much, and find out from their perspective what they're there for, and what it is that they really want. Use that to establish a relationship with them instead of trying to suppress or forget about them, because they're enormous centers of power and really can be great strengths when applied correctly. With these particular interviews, I would say that these three deities were really kind of form the triumvirate of the sacred masculine for me, and kind of have ever since I wrote them. And the work that is entailed in each of them really continues to unfold in my life.
Okay.
The interview with Chiron itself, I mean, it's so enormous in its scope. The whole lesson from that is sort of why it's safe to always be present to pain. And being present to pain is not something that I do well. I am definitely a creature of comfort and luxury. I don't like to be inconvenienced in the slightest. And being intentionally present to pain is definitely not something that I would choose to do without some pretty serious motivation. But the reason that Chiron kind of speaks for, why it's I guess why it's important to do that is because by being present to our own pain, we can also be present to each other's pain, and we can turn that into service. We can turn that into presence, and we can help each other along with managing these wounds. And he asserts that to live is to be wounded, which is definitely something that I believe.
Right, and I would also say that being present to pain allows you to be fully present, because if you have pain and you're avoiding it, then you're spending a lot of energy avoiding it. Like you lose power because you lose your access to your power.
Right.
I interrupted you, though. You can go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think that nowadays, where that work really starting to come into play is really in choosing to be present moment to moment, because there are, amazingly enough, other things to be present to than pain and discomfort. There is joy and laughter and love and companionship and all of the other wonderful, real treasures of life to be present to.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps choosing to practice to be present to all of it requires being present to pain as well.
Yes.
But there's also a tremendous lesson in will, and in the harnessing of personal will and of really understanding what the nature is of making a personal commitment to overcome something is. Finding ways to not worry so much about strategizing how to have courage and strength, and just choosing to trust that it's there and marching through, and just realizing I'm going to take things as they come. I'm going to continue putting the effort out. I'm going to stay focused on getting to the other end of wherever it is that I've chosen to go, whatever chunk of the path that it is, and then that I'm walking, and allow myself to be transformed by that experience, for better and for worse, for comfortable and uncomfortable, pleasurable and painful perhaps, and I'm going to embrace that as part of understanding what my truth is.
Right.
The whole, not just the shiny parts.
Yes. And that's something that I noticed was a common theme. Earlier today I looked through about 6 months of conversations with you that you and I have had online. It was about 100 pages. Oh, it was 96 pages. But it wasn't like full pages. You know, there'd be like a line and then like a break. But anyway, quite a bit of chatting. And that was a theme that came up frequently, was faith versus control. Like when you want to try to, and this comes back to what you were saying about trying to determine the shape of something or the form of something. You think you know what you want, so you try to control it into that. Versus faith, which is allowing the process to happen and trusting that it's okay. That seems very connected to what we're talking about here with the being present, no matter what you're feeling, being present, and then you're able to be guided forward.
Yes. And I don't want any of your listeners to get the impression that I feel like I spend most of my time on the faith side of that equation, because I don't. I definitely consider myself to be a control freak, but and the more that I open to letting go, the more that I open to giving to the process instead of concerning myself with the outcome. The more time I spend with that particular edge of growth, the more that truth continues to come home for me.
Yes.
And continues to give me even more freedom to walk that.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I think that's a really good thing for the listeners to hear, because I think, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you specifically, and why I like talking to people who are working through the questions, who are living the questions in their lives. Because I think sometimes when you listen to radio shows and things like that, and you hear a lot from like published authors and stuff who have a polished message. You know, they do an interview every other day, so they kind of say the same things over and over, and there's not the real gutsiness, the real realness of it, of saying, I struggle. And so I think it creates for people who do listen to this kind of thing a lot, a sense of, oh, well, I can't be like her, I can't be like him, because, I mean, it's just easier for them. You know, they're just a different kind of person than I am, or whatever. And I think it's really valuable to acknowledge that it is hard, it's a struggle, and sometimes it's a back and forth process. And it's that way for everybody. It's not that it's not hard for other people, it's just that people have learned how to filter that out of what they say. But it's such an important thing. And looking at the conversations that you and I have had in the last 6 months or 8 months, actually since January, so it's 8 months, I have noticed that you've come back to that over and over, and you've had the courage to keep on going back to that. You found yourself stuck, and then you've gone back to the faith. You've said, okay, I'm going to open myself up. And then what you found is joy and spontaneity and creativity, and things are flowing. And one thing we talked about, and I hope you don't mind, this isn't, I'm not going to delve into anything that you've said that's too personal. I don't think this one would be too personal. But there's one thing that you said once, which is that once upon a time my life was full of chance reunions.
Yes.
And so you sort of walk through your life, and things would come into your life at the right moment, and conversations would happen right at the right moment. And I think that can be the result of that faith, is that when you do live in the present moment and you are like that, then things sort of flow with you. Would you say that that's true? Do you feel like that's true right now?
Very, very much. It may be more accurate for myself to say that when I'm not making room for those things, they definitely do not happen. When I'm really trying to rigidly control every aspect of my life, when I'm really living in should. Should is a big no-no word for me. This has been a thing for about the last year or so. When I find myself saying, doing this should produce this result, or doing this should make me think this way, or should make me feel this way, or in its more raw form, I should think this way, I should feel this way, therefore these things must be my goal. I'm really completely disconnected from self and from the universe's influence, I guess. Maybe completely disconnected is a little bit of an arrogant thing to say, because obviously, but like I said, I do keep kind of naturally finding my way back to that place of wanting to be open. But it's trying to remember to keep just a little bit open, even at my most afraid, even at my most resistant. Making room for the possibility. Sometimes that's enough.
I love that. I love that. That's great.
Yeah. And like you were saying, about people do have their struggles, no matter how much they have to say in the way of inspiration or insight or enlightenment. I have definitely encountered so many people over the years, and after one conversation walked away totally convinced that person never struggles with anything. I'm like, they've just got it down. They just know everything. They don't have problems the way that I have problems, and that's why I'm messed up, and that's why I'm never going to have any of these things that I want. This person, whatever it is that they've done, that's right, and whatever it is that I've done, it's clearly wrong. They're really, really big, judgmental, self-abuse kind of thing. And what I found from 100% of them, whenever I've bothered to delve into it, is just like you were saying. No, that's not true. There is no point at which anybody has it figured out. We really are just all kind of wandering down this road together, and we share our enlightenments, we share our insights, and help each other along the way. And that's the best that we can do. And it's wonderful. It's one of the things that makes life, I think, such a joyous experience. The ability to help one another realize that the world is bigger and that there are more possibilities than anything that we could know.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So what personal is there a story right now that's speaking to you that where you're at this moment in your journey?
This happened. This got sparked a little bit before I went to Pagan Spirit Gathering. I posted some song lyrics on Facebook and wound up getting a comment back. The lyrics were see, this is what I mentioned before about occasionally needing to collect myself. The lyrics were about flight, and flight is a very personal, ecstatic thing for me. When I really nail the divine connection, the moments in life where I'm really there and feel like I have it, it feels like flying. I feel like my feet just are getting ready to lift off the ground. That's wonderful. And somebody posted as a comment, "Hey, be careful there, Icarus." And kind of since then, the myth of Icarus has kind of been in my head. I recently talked to somebody who didn't know the story of Icarus. So just as a very brief synopsis, Icarus was the Greek character who flew on wax wings into the sky and flew too close to the sun, where the wax wings melted, and then he fell to Earth and he died. And what is kind of commonly accepted as the interpretation is to be careful about ambition, and that there are some things that man was not meant to do. And I guess when this person posted this particular comment, I was just like, I'm not having it. I'm sorry. It is definitely my turn to fly, and I'm going to do it. And so I posted back. Really, we don't really know that much about Icarus. We know that he flew, and we know that he fell, but we don't really know what happened to him. It might have been worth it. Maybe he found something in that last hour of his life that made it worth it to die in that way, in that moment. And I'm actually working on putting together some magical training work around that particular myth right now. In terms of manifestation of it, I'm very excited that for the first time in 2012, for the first time in 13 years, I'm actually going back to school. In about 9 days, the semester starts up, and I'm going to the prestigious Johnson County Community College here for their game development associate's degree, and I am beside myself with excited about it. And this really feels like a wonderful opportunity, and one that I'm eager to get into. And I have no idea where it's going to lead. There's any of 100 different things that I could be choosing to do with my life right now, and I'm choosing to pursue this thing that probably isn't going to make me rich or prosperous, but just feels like what I have to do. And I love that I have the ability to reach out and take it.
Is there some of that fear that if you fly that you might die, you might crash?
Intensely, very much, yes. I don't know what success looks like. I don't know what the journey between here and no, it's really okay, I can do this looks like. I don't know if I really believe that there is one. I think maybe particular manifestations of what comes out of this dream aside, I think one of the big seeds of personal growth that's in this for me is letting go of needing to have the outcome and understanding how to practice having that daily devotion to the seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's where the real value in this comes from.
That's the thing you might pull out of it.
Yes.
You might get more out of it too, but that by itself is a valuable thing.
Yep.
So, sorry. You go ahead.
I was just going to say I expect that is definitely something that I will get out of it, and on some level I'm like, well, if I get that, then that will be awesome, and everything else will just be gravy. And well, on the other side, I'm like I'm really hoping to get something really spectacular and magical out of it too.
Sure.
I can't help it.
I think it's okay to have hope.
I don't know.
I think it's okay to have hope as long as you still keep moving forward when you don't have hope.
Yeah. It's all about keeping the dream alive.
Yeah. So we kind of have an arbitrary time thing today because we only have one interview, and I don't mean only because of course it's a spectacular opportunity to talk to you. But I'm just saying otherwise it would be 1 hour. I try to stick close to an hour so the show doesn't go too much over 2 hours because that's longer than most people can listen. But I think we're kind of getting towards the end. Before we finish up, did you want to talk about martial arts at all, or being?
Oh, sure, yeah. No,
being a sword fighter.
Yes, I'm so proud of being able to actually have that title. But one of the other things that I do with my time, and I do quite a bit of it. I would say about a quarter of the weekends of my year, maybe pushing a third at this point, are dedicated to Renaissance festivals and medieval reenactment and the like. And I study traditional Western longsword with a few formal teachers and a whole lot of extremely informal students, and it's a blast. It's amazing, kind of rediscovering the really beautiful mergings of the martial with the spiritual that exists in Western culture and history that no one seems to know about. I grew up being enchanted with Eastern martial arts. I was very, very small and very weak and very, very intelligent, but not physically coordinated as a child. And I grew up, watching things like The Karate Kid and occasionally catching a Bruce Lee movie. And I know he's not actually a martial artist, but I didn't care at the time. I loved Jean-Claude Van Damme as a kid. I'll admit it. And really loved the idea that study and discipline and devotion, the things that I was naturally good at, had the possibility, when applied with courage and hard work, to overcome brute strength in this very graceful and elegant kind of way. To put a little bit of kind of bluntness on that particular romantic edge, really that was just about seeking power in one way or another. But it did get me into martial arts at a very young age, and it's remained a part of my life ever since then. But what really transformed about it over time, at times it's been about having a relationship with the development of personal power. I studied Kung Fu for a number of years, where instead of individual techniques being really, taught to be perfected and mastered, the idea is ultimately to understand one's personal energy of mastery and to live within it. And then there's any other number of sort of what I've discovered to be really universal martial philosophies about letting go of form and letting go of control and just standing in balance and standing in stillness. The idea that strength is a gift that's meant to protect those without strength. That to be a warrior fundamentally means to be of service. And those things have really driven and shaped me in a lot of ways. But what's really formed the root of it all, I talked a little bit about this earlier. My belief in the innate human desire for growth, the value of the martial practice is one of understanding self-honesty. Can I be truly aware of where my strengths and weaknesses are? And can I choose to apply my strengths well, and can I choose to train myself to be stronger in the ways that I am currently weak? Can I choose to accept the ways in which I will never be strong and learn to ask for help, to rely on someone else for it? And it really winds up it really does wind up becoming a personal philosophy based on compassion and universal respect, and fueled by the constant drive to do more and grow more and become more. And that's something that I really try to cultivate in my own life, and something that I really try to honor in others. I believe that we all have it to some degree. I really try to add some fuel to the fire where I see it.
Very cool. I feel like you answered all the questions I was going to ask in there.
Oh, terrific.
But I like that. And one of the things that you said in our conversation about it was you talked about how there's a connection between an ecstatic ritual and martial arts. And what you said was that both are rooted in finding an edge and pushing it. Ecstasy comes when the impossible is suddenly possible. So I like that idea, like that always pushing the edge, always. And to me, that includes like going towards what makes you uncomfortable, and that ties right back into everything you were saying about being present with the pain and that sort of thing.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I think there's also a connection there to the idea that is commonly presented about people being not afraid that they will fail, but being afraid that they will succeed when it comes to personal desire. I remember the first time that I broke a board in Taekwondo class, which was something that I previously would not have believed was possible. And when I discovered how easy it was, based on what I had been trained for up until that point, what really came through, and God, I can remember this so clearly, was a sudden awareness of, okay, if that's possible, what else is possible?
Yes.
The sense of just expansion of the universe, and I have seen people in breaking demonstrations do things that I still don't believe I could get around to doing. I've seen people put their fingertips through concrete blocks, stacks of 6 at a time, from a distance of 3 inches, without even pulling their hand back. I mean, just things that look like they have to be magic tricks, and watching them do them again and again, and just being so amazed at it, and still having to accept that, yes, those things are possible. And, taking it back to things like ecstatic ritual, ecstatic ritual, I still really love that description, when the impossible suddenly becomes possible. That sense of vast awareness really has to come from the sudden achievement of a personal goal that maybe seemed impossible before then, and it can be large or small. Magical work doesn't necessarily have to be epic in scope in order to have a really epic impact.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one thing that you were talking about with having the feeling that you can't do something, but then you do it, and you think, well, what else can I do then? What else is really possible? That speaks to me a lot about, the human potential. I mean, how much is human potential limited by what we think it's limited by? I mean, everybody knows about the 4-minute mile guy. For the longest time, nobody thought it was possible to run a mile in 4 minutes. And then all of a sudden someone does. I mean, not all of a sudden. He worked and trained hard, but it happened. He did it. And then all of a sudden, I mean, all the fastest runners can beat 4 minutes. It's not even a thing anymore. I mean, it's just, like once you push past that, then all of a sudden so much more is just opens up, not only for you, but for everybody else. In the description of the show, which is on the website, actually the description of the host, I talk about myself a little bit. I had an experience. Well, I've had a number of experiences where I pushed past some kind of limit that I had, because I used to have a lot of limits. But for me, it really started with when I pushed past the crippling depression that I had when I was like in my early 20s, late teens. The doctors all said, you can't get better. You're not going to get better. Medication will help some, but you'll never be able to go without medication. And the chances of you surviving your 20s is pretty unlikely. Which is which is awfully bleak of them, and there's all sorts of things you can say about the medical model of healing, and that's a different conversation. But I did it. I managed to do it, and I'm not saying that beating depression is just a matter of like willpower. It's something beyond that. It's something about intention and just finding the possibility. It is something magical, but it can be possible. And once I had that, then anytime anybody says, oh, well, you can't do that because it's impossible, I'm like, well, I've been told that before. I've been told that before, and those words are kind of somewhat meaningless to me at this point. Because it's just, I've done what was already told, what to me was impossible and what seemed impossible to me, and I've done so much healing and work since then. So I know that it must be possible. And so, when this is me taking it out into a broader, worldview, is like when people talk about that it's impossible for us to heal the world or that sort of thing. Like, I think that we have to make changes in order to have a better relationship with the world. Like, I don't think we can continue to live the way we've been living. But, to me, I'm hardwired for hope at this point. And even when I don't have hope, like I talked about before, I still feel like it's important to keep going whether you have hope or not. But I do have hope because I feel like the human potential is so great. And actually, one other little anecdote. The other one, my first story wasn't really an anecdote, but this one is I had a spiritual teacher once who I was in a period of time in my life where I was scared. My fears were holding me back. So he gave me an exercise. He said, "I'm going to pick something that you're scared of, and I want you to do it over and over and over again until you get over it." Because fear is like a cloth that covers a doorway. So you don't want to face fear. And so you end up trapped in like one little room in your little personal maze. But then when you see that the fear is actually something you can walk through, there's actually a doorway there, then all of a sudden everything opens up to you when fear stops being an obstacle. And the exercise he gave me was to go parallel park all around town. And that sounds like a little thing, but it was in Minneapolis, and I hated parallel parking at the time. It freaked the crap out of me. But I spent 3 hours, like about 4 or 5 p.m. on a weekday, parallel parking around like downtown Minneapolis area. And it was awful. Like other cars hated me, and sometimes like I would pick a spot just because it was possible to parallel park, but there was actually spots all up and down the street that was actually a little bit out of downtown, but there was traffic behind me, and everybody was honking because they're like, "Lady, you can park anywhere you want. Why are you picking this spot and making us all stop?" So it's kind of like a jerky thing for me to do, but I knew like I had to get over my fear of what they thought about me, and I had to get over my fear of doing it under that kind of pressure. And I did it. I spent the whole afternoon like parallel parking, and it was amazing after that how free I felt. Like it was a silly thing, but
and I'm sure that your ability to parallel park was much improved even just by the end of that afternoon.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. I got a lot less scared of it and a lot better at it. No doubt. No doubt. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we took off? Are there any like few connections you're seeing that we didn't quite touch on?
No, I don't think so. I haven't really kept track. I've had an absolutely wonderful time with the conversation. I'm really, really grateful for the chance to have it with you.
Yay! Yeah. It's super fun. I like this. It's sort of like a interview jam session, kind of.
Yeah.
We're just like, here's a riff, there's a riff. Actually, there is one more thing I want to touch on, just really quick. And we have touched on this, but not like we haven't. I don't think we framed it exactly this way, but we've talked about it quite a bit, and it's something another thing that we've talked about in conversations in the past, and that's mythic life versus normality. And it seems like sometimes is it fear that leads you to wanting to be normal sometimes? Or what do you think it is that makes you want to be normal instead of living the mythic life?
I think that's really a craving for acceptance more than anything. I really fear the loneliness that I think in my heart of hearts I really expect to come from any committed pursuit of a passionate dream or goal. I don't really know where that comes from, but I do know that it's a reflex, and I think that wanting to turn away from those things is really born of I don't want to have to reach the point where in order to continue growing I need to make the sacrifices of the comfortable things in my life, whether that's comfortable relationships or comfortable living spaces, comfortable levels of income. But a lot easier to stick with the known. Maybe for just 1 or 2 more years, I'll stick with the known, and maybe after that, I'll bother to take the chance to branch out. Like I was saying earlier about the difference between planning to have the strength and courage and just having it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's where that really lands for me.
But at the same time, you are called to that mythic life, where
of course,
the life of chance reunions and living your dreams and
yep,
having everything flow.
Without fail. I can only lie to myself for so long.
Right.
So a tremendous blessing that I have in my spirit, that it will not stay asleep forever. And I don't think that that's something that is unique to me. I think that's something that is true of every person. You know, people might feel like they're taking chunks of time off from their life. I know I've certainly felt that way before. But growth still happens, even if it's invisible, and little shifts and changes happen, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, sometimes, zoom, path starts back up again.
Yeah. It keeps coming back for us. Although that makes it sound scary. But I guess it's scary if you want to be comfortable and you're like, no, I don't remember that I have dreams.
Maybe scary in the way that a roller coaster ride is scary.
Right.
You know, if I trust that the thing has been built well and I don't need to worry about my personal well-being, then I can have quite an exciting time.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad for you that you keep on coming back to this openness and this faith and the pursuit of your dreams. Like to me, it seems like it's accelerating in your life.
I think so. That's really what this particular time period feels like, and maybe it won't stay that way forever, but that's how it is right now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in and talking with me.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no problem. I've enjoyed it. So anybody listening out there, if you want to stay in touch and find out what upcoming interviews are, you can go to www.connectingbetween.com, and on there is the email sign-up sheet as well as the Twitter and the Facebook links. Let me know if you are interested in sharing music with the show, or if you have a topic you'd really like to see covered, or if you would really like to be on the show. All of us are living out our own stories, and we all have our own dreams, and that we have all learned our own things. We all have our own wisdoms to contribute and our own stories to share. So I definitely am interested in talking with people. And thank you again, Steve, for coming on.
And thank you, Epiphany.
Awesome. And the recording of the show will be available in a couple days or so on the website. And thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us in this journey today. Although we are in confusing times, perhaps there is hope. Perhaps not all is lost. Perhaps we can still transform ourselves, our relationship with each other and the planet. May we find our way to a different way of life together. As you go through your week, may you reflect and realize that you too have unique gifts to share. When you fully embody your own spirit, sharing your gifts can enrich not only your own life, but ripples of healing change can extend outward from yourself, touching others. We are in this together, and we can do this together.